You didn't go to the food. The food came to you, and the man who brought it knew your name. Close your eyes for just a moment and try to go back. Not to a photograph, not to a television program, not to some sepia-toned version of the past that never quite tells the whole truth. Go back to the actual morning, to the specific sound of it, that low, rolling rumble coming down the street before the sun had fully cleared the roof lines. A sound you haven't heard in 50 years, perhaps, but one that lives somewhere deep and undisturbed in the oldest part of your memory. The Divco milk truck, with its rounded nose and its forward-mounted door, rolling slowly, barely faster than a walking pace, stopping every few houses, the engine idling with a particular patience, and then the sound that followed, the metallic, musical clink of glass bottles shifting in a wire carrier as a man climbed down from the cab without needing to close the door behind him, because he'd be back in under a minute. Do you remember that sound? The clink of glass against glass? Clean, bright, utterly distinct from any sound the modern world makes. It was the sound of morning beginning, of someone already at work while most of the street still slept. He moved without hurrying. That is something worth noticing. The milkman didn't rush. He walked with a kind of practiced ease, the wire carrier held low at his side, the bottles swinging slightly with each step, and there was a rhythm to it. A confidence that said he had walked this same path 1,000 mornings before. He knew where the step was uneven. He knew which porch light stayed on all night, and which family preferred their delivery left beside the side door rather than the front. He knew the names of the dogs, so they didn't bark. He moved through the neighborhood the way someone moves through a place that belongs to them, not with ownership, but with belonging, which is a different thing entirely and a better one. There was something the milkman saw every single morning that no one else in the neighborhood ever witnessed. Something intimate and unguarded and completely real, and it made him, without anyone ever saying so, a quiet keeper of the neighborhood's secrets. We'll come back to that, but first, let us just stand here, at the screen door, in bare feet, in the gray-blue light of a 1963 morning. Let us just listen. The street is quiet, not the dead quiet of 3 in the morning, but the living quiet of 5:30. When the birds are just beginning to test the day and the dew is still heavy on the grass, and the air carries that clean particular smell that exists only in the first hour of morning. A little damp, a little green, faintly cool against your cheek. The neighborhood is not asleep, exactly. It is waking in stages, the way a face wakes before the eyes open. A kitchen light comes on 2 houses down, a screen door eases shut with a soft, compressed sigh. And then, there it is again, the low rumble turning the corner at the top of the block, and your whole body knows before your mind catches up, the milk truck is here. The milkman's name, do you remember it? Your milkman's name, not the company. Not the brand printed on the side of the truck in friendly, confident lettering. His name. The name your mother said when she talked about him at the breakfast table. The name she might have put at the top of a small note, tucked into the neck of an empty bottle the night before. Please leave 2 extra quarts Thursday, company coming. Or perhaps just, thank you, Roy. Think about it. The name is probably still in there, in some quiet fold of memory, waiting for the right morning to surface. His uniform was clean every single day, even though the work was physical and early and constant. A white or light gray shirt, sometimes a matching jacket in the colder months. A company patch on the chest. Borden's, Seal Test, Foremost, Hood, Carnation, or perhaps the name of a local dairy you could only find if you grew up in that particular town. He wore a cap, bill forward, nothing ornate. Just the kind of cap that said, I have a job to do, and I take it seriously. In winter, the cap sat lower on his forehead, and sometimes, if it was cold enough, you could see the pale cloud of his breath, small, white, rising as he leaned down to pull a bottle from the carrier, as he set it carefully, quietly, into the insulated metal box on the porch. The kind of box that sat beside your front door year-round, white or cream-colored, with a hinged lid and a simple latch, the interior cool even in summer because the thick metal walls did their slow, patient work. The glass bottle itself, let's stay with it for a moment, because it deserves that. There is nothing in the modern refrigerator that feels quite like a full quart of milk in a glass bottle. The weight of it, distributed evenly, cool and solid in your hand. The glass smooth and faintly beaded with condensation the moment you brought it inside. The paper cap, sometimes cardboard, sometimes foil. Always that particular cream and red or cream and blue of the dairy's colors, pressed into the mouth of the bottle, easy to pry off with a thumbnail. And beneath it, if you'd been patient enough to let the bottle sit undisturbed, that thick, yellowish line of cream that had risen overnight to the very top. Whole milk, real milk, the kind of milk where the fat did what fat naturally does, climbed. Your mother might shake the bottle to mix it back in, or she might carefully pour that cream off first for coffee, or for whipping, or just because it was a small luxury that cost nothing extra. Either way, the cream line was there, visible, honest, a daily proof that what was inside was real. And there was something else the bottle offered, something so simple it is almost impossible to explain to anyone who grew up after it disappeared. It went back. The empty bottle, washed and rinsed by your mother the night before, left in the morning in the wire carrier or beside the porch box, was collected, returned to the dairy, washed again, refilled, and sent back out. The same bottle perhaps that had sat on your grandmother's porch a decade before. A glass bottle could make 100 trips before it finally broke. There was no waste in it, no disposability, just a quiet, everyday economy that assumed tomorrow's milk was worth preparing for today. That the bottle was not a single-use object, but a participant in something continuous and communal and entirely sane. Now, close your eyes again and consider this. One of these delivery people did not come with the light. One of them arrived long before sunrise, in the deep black before the sky had even begun, considering the possibility of gray. In the complete dark of 4 in the morning, the stars still hard and bright overhead, the street utterly still. And if you were ever awake at that hour, a sleepless child, a mother up with a newborn, a grandfather who couldn't get back to sleep and sat in his chair by the window with a glass of water, if you ever heard those footsteps on the porch in that absolute silence, you felt something that was not quite of the ordinary world. You felt like you had glimpsed another life running just beneath the surface of your own, a life of work and devotion that most people slept straight through without ever knowing it was there. We'll come back to him too, but right now, the bread man is coming. And if you've forgotten what fresh bread smells like at 6 in the morning, the specific warmth of it, traveling half a block on a cool April air, let this remind you. The bread man's truck was different from the milk truck, a panel van usually, painted in the bright colors of the bakery, the brand name in large friendly lettering on the side. Wonder Bread with its circles of red, yellow, and blue. Sunbeam with the little girl in her bonnet. Or perhaps the van belonged to a regional bakery that you knew only by the smell it left behind on a Tuesday morning, when it idled at the curb 3 doors down and the wind was coming from the east. That smell, warm yeast, flour, a sweetness just beneath the surface, the faintest trace of something almost still hot, could drift across a front yard and through a screen door and into a kitchen where a family was not yet fully awake. And it did something to the body that had nothing strictly to do with hunger. It was closer to comfort, to the feeling that the day, whatever it held, was going to be all right. He carried a large, shallow tray. The bread man, balanced on one forearm with the ease of long practice, stacked with wrapped loaves and sometimes rolls, and by the later years of the decade, perhaps a box of Hostess cakes as well, a package of Twinkies on the corner of the tray. The yellow sponge cake in its cellophane, a small miracle of modern baking that the children of the street considered only slightly less exciting than a holiday. But the bread itself, the actual fresh bread, that was the heart of it. A new loaf of white bread, still faintly warm if you got to it early enough, the wrapper making a soft rustle as you picked it up, the bread inside yielding slightly under your fingers in a way that no supermarket loaf on a shelf ever quite managed. Soft, alive almost. The kind of bread that seemed to remember it had just been made. Some bread men represented national brands, but many worked routes for local or regional bakeries. Mrs. Carl's in Milwaukee Langendorf on the West Coast, or Rowwheat in California, or the Family Bakery, 3 towns over whose name you would only know if you happened to grow up in that particular neighborhood. These men were not merely delivery drivers, they were representatives of a specific taste, a specific morning, a relationship between a bakery and a street that went back, in some cases, 15 or 20 years. The bread man knew which family preferred rye. He knew the household that always needed an extra loaf on Fridays for the weekend. He knew the woman who set out a note asking for the cinnamon roll with extra icing because her husband's birthday was Thursday and it was the only bakery treat he ever asked for by name. He remembered. Without a database, without a profile, without a notification. He just remembered because that was part of the job, the real part, the part that made it worth doing every morning. The egg lady was something different again. Quieter, usually. She arrived on a regular schedule, Tuesdays and Fridays perhaps, or every Monday and Thursday, depending on the neighborhood and the farm and the arrangement that had been made at some point, possibly before you were born. She was not always a woman, of course. Sometimes it was a farmer from just outside town, driving a pickup truck or an old station wagon with the back loaded with flat cartons packed in sawdust or straw. Perhaps a jar of raw honey with comb floating in it, sometimes fresh butter wrapped in waxed paper, sometimes in autumn a basket of apples, or a few pounds of green beans or sweet corn. But in memory, across a remarkable number of households, across a remarkable number of cities and towns, she is a woman, the egg lady, perhaps in a housecoat under a light coat, perhaps with a scarf over her hair, carrying a basket lined with a folded cloth. The eggs nested inside in their natural brown or white shells, sometimes still with a feather or a trace of clay that told you, without any label or certification needed, exactly where they had come from and how recently they had been gathered. There is a particular quality to an egg from a farm that you knew by name, not just the taste, though the taste was genuinely different, the yolk a deeper yellow, almost orange, rich and full in a way that the pale supermarket egg never quite managed, but the feeling of holding it, the slight irregularity of the shell, the subtle variation in size that no machine had corrected into uniformity. These were eggs gathered that morning or the morning before. They were, in the most literal sense possible, fresh, and the woman who brought them had chickens with names. She knew your mother's name. She remembered that you had been sick the week before, and she had brought a little extra that week, unprompted, just in case. Who delivered to your house, and can you still picture their face? Take a moment with that question. Let the face come, if it will. The way he held the wire carrier, the way she called through the screen door, the specific voice on a Tuesday morning in April, when the lilacs were just beginning in the side yard and the birds were making an absolute celebration of it. That face, that voice, on that specific morning, it belongs to no one else on earth. It belongs to you, and it is not lost. It is simply waiting, in a quiet place, for the right morning to come back to it. There was more than milk and bread and eggs coming to the door in those years. There was a whole quiet commerce moving through the neighborhood on foot and by truck, arriving with a knock or a familiar call, requiring no car trip and no errand and no advance planning. The dry cleaner's boy came on certain mornings with garments wrapped in thin paper, hung carefully from the door handle. The butcher's shop sometimes sent a delivery on Fridays, a paper-wrapped package tied with white cotton twine, the paper cold and faintly damp, the smell clean and honest. On some streets, near the coasts or the rivers, a fishmonger's truck came through once or twice a week, a refrigerated van with a bell or a small horn, driven by a man who could tell you whether the flounder had come in that morning and whether the clams were worth the price this week or whether you'd be better served waiting until Thursday. And then there was the jewel tea man. If you grew up in the Midwest or parts of the South, you may remember him with particular fondness, or your mother may have, which amounts to the same thing. He drove a route for the Jewel Tea Company, which was not a tea company at all, but something closer to a traveling general store compressed into a truck. He brought coffee and spices and cleaning supplies and specialty items, and if your mother had been collecting enough points from her purchases, perhaps a piece of the famous autumn leaf china pattern, a teacup, a salad plate, a gravy boat, delivered one piece at a time over months and years. the collection growing slowly on the kitchen shelf, each new arrival a small occasion. He was a salesman, yes, but he was also a visitor, a regular presence in the week. Someone who knew the kitchen and its preferences, and the particular brand of vanilla extract that your mother had used for 30 years and would not consider replacing. There was the potato chip man, too, in many areas. A driver from Charles Chips arrived not with a bag, but with a large round metal tin printed with the company's familiar design, which he delivered full and collected empty on his next pass. The cycle as natural as the milk bottles returning to the dairy. The satisfying weight of a full tin, the sound of the lid when you pried it back, the chips inside fresh enough that the metal kept the air out and the crunch in a way that the supermarket bag with its twist tie never quite replicated. In other neighborhoods it might have been Tom's or a regional brand, but the principle held everywhere. The snack came to you, delivered, expected, part of the weekly order, as naturally as anything else. All of these people, the milkman, the bread man, the egg lady, the jewel tea man, the chip delivery driver, the fishmonger who rang his bell twice on a Friday, moved through the same streets at different hours, on different schedules, but together they made up something that needed no name because it didn't need explaining. It was simply how things worked. It was the local economy behaving the way a local economy behaves when it has grown slowly and organically enough to fit the actual shape of people's lives. Not efficient in the modern sense, not optimized, not designed by anyone sitting in a room with a whiteboard. Just real, just human, just the way Tuesday mornings worked and had worked for as long as anyone on the street could remember. And the children who grew up in those mornings absorbed all of it without knowing they were absorbing anything at all. Because you were 8 years old, perhaps, and what you knew was this. If you got up early enough to be in the kitchen before your mother, early enough to hear the truck before it stopped, you could be at the screen door when the milkman came up the steps. And sometimes, if you were there often enough, if he had been coming to your house long enough, he might pause for just a moment and acknowledge you. Not with a speech, nothing like that. Just a nod, or a quiet morning sun, the kind of acknowledgement that said, I see you, you're here early. Good for you. Something in that simple recognition, given freely, asked for nothing, from a man in a white uniform carrying a wire basket in the gray light of a September morning. Something in it landed in the chest of an 8-year-old child and stayed there for 60 years. Maybe you remember running out in your pajamas once. Maybe it was summer, the porch warm and your feet bare on the wood planks, and you wanted to carry a bottle in, maybe two, showing off a little the way children do when they want to be genuinely useful. The glass was cold enough to make your palms tingle. You carried them carefully, very carefully, because even at 8 years old you understood without anyone saying so that the glass bottles were not to be dropped. And you set them on the kitchen counter with a sense of having contributed something real to the morning. And your mother said thank you and meant it, and that was enough. He knew when you were sick. He knew when you had a new baby. He knew your mother's first name. He knew it because he had been coming to the door for years, and in those years he had paid attention in the quiet, steady, unsentimental way of someone whose job brings him to the same place every morning, and who understands that what he sees there is not his to speak of, but his to notice. Now, let's go back to what the milkman saw. Remember that something intimate, that unguarded and real thing that made him a quiet keeper of the neighborhood's secrets. Here it is, and it is smaller and truer than anything dramatic. He saw the house before anyone in it was ready to be seen. He arrived before the curtains were open, before the front walk had been swept, before anyone had thought to arrange themselves for the day. He saw which house had a newborn, because there were twice as many quarts on the order, and a light burning in the upstairs window at 3 in the morning, and sometimes a face at the glass, just a pale shape, too tired to wave, but there. He saw which family had a son come home from the service, because suddenly the order grew, and a small flag had appeared beside the door. He saw which house was going through a difficult time, because the order had dropped from 4 quarts a week to 2, and then to 1, and the note in the bottle had a slight tremor to the handwriting. He saw the seasons of a marriage and the growing of children and the slow, soft alteration of what a family needed, year by year. He never spoke of any of it. That wasn't the arrangement. The arrangement, unspoken and absolute, was that he would come to the door before the world was watching, and he would leave what was needed, and he would take back the empty, and he would not carry with him anything that was not his to carry. The privacy of the early morning was a gift he received, and a gift he returned every day for years. The trust of the household was given without discussion. It was not a contract. It was something more reliable than a contract. It was habit, built into the structure of the morning itself. Do you understand now why the silence of an empty porch feels like something more than just an absence? Now let's go back to the one who came before sunrise. Sometimes it was the milkman himself on a particularly long route, completing his rounds in the deep black before any neighbor's alarm clock had stirred. Sometimes it was the bakery's first driver, a man who had been awake since midnight, preparing and loading and driving so that the bread would be on the step before the household rose. But the particular quality of being awake at 4 in the morning, the sky still fully black, the stars sharp overhead, the street silent in a way that had a physical weight, and hearing those footsteps on the porch in that absolute dark, that was something singular, not frightening. You knew the footsteps, you knew the routine, but there was something almost sacred in it, the understanding that out there, invisible, while every house on the street lay still, a man was doing his work, making his rounds, carrying sustenance to sleeping families who would wake in an hour or two and find it there, cold and perfect, as if it had always been there, as if it had required no one to rise in the cold darkness to make it so. He drove with his headlights lowered sometimes, not to be deceptive, simply to be considerate, to let the street sleep as long as it could. There was a tenderness in that, a respect for the sleeping world that asked nothing in return. And if you ever caught a glimpse of him through the window glass, a shape moving in the dark, the brief, muffled thud of the insulated box lid, the retreating footsteps on the walk, the truck's engine picking back up at the curb and moving on, you carried that image with you for a long time, a man delivering in the dark, not celebrated, not even particularly noticed, just there, just doing the work, in the hours when most of the world had agreed not to be awake. That was the full measure of what it meant to have someone come to your door. In the warmer months, the mornings softened and the exchanges lengthened. Spring brought a different quality to the doorstep, a loosening, a willingness to linger a few extra seconds before the route continued. The milkman might pause to remark on the tulips coming up along the walk. Or the egg lady might mention that her hens were laying exceptionally well this week, the way they always did when the days grew longer. She might bring a little extra, not because you'd asked, but because she understood the patterns of your family's kitchen without needing to be told. She knew that Easter was coming, and there would be colored eggs at the table, and a cake that needed a full dozen. And she had seen the butter being set out on Saturdays, and she simply brought more, without a form, without an algorithm suggesting it based on your previous order history. She knew because she had been paying attention. The way neighbors pay attention when they care about each other and see each other regularly and understand that caring is expressed in small, practical acts rather than large declarations. What was the one thing you always hoped would be in the delivery? The thing that turned an ordinary Tuesday morning into something close to an occasion? The chocolate milk, perhaps, that brown glass bottle with the Borden's label, the Elsie the Cow logo warm and familiar on the glass, the milk inside a genuine deep chocolate that the thin, sweet imitations in cardboard cartons never came close to matching, or the cottage cheese in its paper container, mysterious in its utility, essential to some kitchen purpose you couldn't quite trace, but which mattered clearly to whoever ran the household. Or was it something from the breadman's tray, a particular pastry, an iced bun, a cinnamon roll that appeared not every week but on certain mornings by what seemed like its own logic, making it impossible to anticipate and therefore genuinely glorious when it was there? Let that question sit. Think about it honestly. The one thing, you know what it was, because the small extras were, in many ways, the most expressive part of a system that expressed a great deal. The Christmas season changed the morning deliveries in ways a child noticed acutely. The milkman might, on a December morning, reach into the side of the carrier and produce a small candy cane, red and white, slightly cold from the truck, pressed into your hand with a wink and nothing else. No announcement, no ceremony. Just the candy cane and the wink, and the understanding that it was December and he was glad to see you, and had been glad to see you every morning for years. Your mother might that same week have left a little extra in the empty bottle, a few dollar bills folded tight, or a small envelope with a card, or a tin of the Christmas cookies she'd made the day before. A gift, a recognition, a way of saying, "We know you are out there in the cold every morning while we are warm inside, and we are grateful, and we wanted you to know." The bread man in the weeks before Christmas sometimes brought extra, an additional loaf for the holiday sandwiches. Left without additional charge for a family he'd been serving for 7 years. Not documented in any route sheet, not announced. Just done, the way a neighbor would do it, because that was what he was. And the egg lady, reliably, in December, arrived with a dozen extra every week, because she knew the baking season of every kitchen she served. She had watched the flour tins grow lighter through the month and understood, as someone who had grown up with the rhythms of a kitchen, that December required more of everything, and she brought it before she was asked. These acts of small, unrequested generosity, the candy cane, the extra loaf, the bonus dozen, were not marketing. They were not loyalty programs or retention strategies or calculated investments in customer goodwill. They were something older and more straightforward, the expression of a relationship that had been built, one morning at a time, across years. The milkman had been coming to the same houses for so long that he was, without anyone ever formally acknowledging it, part of the neighborhood, part of the texture of the street, not a family member, something different, something that might require its own word, a word we may have lost along with the service itself, the trusted regular, the daily face, the person whose absence you would notice, the way you notice when a familiar sound suddenly stops. There were mornings when someone new appeared at the door, a substitute, covering the route while the regular man was ill or on vacation, and the neighborhood noticed immediately, in the way the neighborhood always noticed anything that deviated from the established pattern. It was perfectly civil to the substitute. Your mother was always gracious, but there was a distance to it, a slight formal quality, because this was not Roy. This was not the man who had been here every morning for 6 years, who knew about the extra quart for company and the note left on Thursdays, and the little girl who liked to stand at the screen door and watch the bottles go in. This was someone who was simply delivering milk, which was, when you considered it honestly, almost entirely beside the point. The point had never been the milk. The years of the delivery men, those warm particular years of the late 1950s and the whole length of the 1960s, did not end all at once. Nothing that genuine ever does. It thinned, the way the morning light thins at the end of summer, so gradually that you keep believing it's still summer, until one day you realize the quality of the air has changed, and you can't say precisely when. The supermarket had been there for years, of course. The big, bright, refrigerated aisles with their fluorescent hum and their wire carts and their impossible abundance. But for a long while it coexisted naturally with the delivery route. People did both. They drove to the store for the weekly staples, and they kept their milk delivery and their bread man and their egg lady, because those were different things answering different needs. The store gave you everything. The delivery gave you the morning. But the cars got bigger and the roads got wider and the supermarkets grew larger still, and at some point the calculation shifted. It was more efficient, someone decided. Drive to the store and buy a cardboard carton. Homogenized now, the cream mixed in permanently. No rising line to shake back down. Then to maintain a milk box and leave notes in empty bottles and manage the particular accounting of a standing delivery order. The cardboard carton was lighter. It was disposable. It didn't need to come back. And in not coming back, in being simply discarded, something else went with it that no one quite tallied at the time. The cycle, the return, the quiet understanding that the bottle was not yours to consume and throw away, but yours to use and send back, that your delivery was part of something larger than your own refrigerator. Plastic came alongside or just after. And by the early 1970s, the glass milk bottle had essentially disappeared from the American doorstep. Some dairies tried to hold on. There were loyal customers. There were local campaigns. There was something that came close to grief in certain households when the announcement came. But the economics were unambiguous. Glass was heavier and more expensive and required the whole infrastructure of collection and washing and return. Plastic was cheaper and lighter and could simply be manufactured and abandoned. And that was that. The breadman's route thinned first in the newer suburban neighborhoods, where the shopping centers had generous parking and a young mother with a car could accomplish everything in one trip, bread and milk and eggs and chips and everything else, without waiting for the Tuesday van. The routes contracted. The companies consolidated. A breadman who had once served 40 houses on a personal route found himself doing 60, then 80, moving too quickly for the small conversations and the knowing of names and the extra roll left for a customer's birthday. And then the routes disappeared entirely, absorbed into wholesale delivery to the large grocery chains, and the van that had rolled down the residential street became a truck that backed up to a loading dock, somewhere out of sight, and the bread that emerged from it appeared on a shelf under fluorescent lights, stacked in uniform, and no one had brought it to anyone's door. There is a particular moment that many people remember, though they remember it in different houses and different years, and it amounts to the same moment regardless. The day the milkman mentioned he'd be retiring, or the day a letter arrived saying the delivery service would be discontinued in this area at the end of the month. Your mother heard it first, perhaps, and mentioned it at the dinner table in a voice that was matter-of-fact on the surface, but carried something she wasn't quite naming. And the family absorbed the information the way families absorb the small, necessary losses of ordinary life, without ceremony, without quite acknowledging that something specific and irreplaceable was ending. Perhaps she left a particularly generous tip in the bottle that last week. Perhaps she baked something and left it on the step with a note. In some neighborhoods, the retirement of a long-serving milkman was a genuine, if quiet, occasion. A neighbor might organize a card and gather signatures from the households on the road. Someone would bring coffee and stand on their porch to wave as the truck made its final pass. A small group of women who had left notes in empty bottles for 15 years might gather at one house and present something, a watch, a picture frame, a framed photograph of the street. Nothing extravagant, but chosen with genuine care and real affection. And the milkman would stand there on someone's porch, this man who had been awake before dawn every morning for 2 decades, who had carried milk in every weather through every season, who had known their names and their orders and their children's faces and their mothers who had died and their new babies who had arrived, and he would probably say that it had been his pleasure and mean every word of it. And they would mean their thanks. And then he would drive away for the last time, and the street would be quiet, in a way it had not been quiet before, and it would stay quiet the next morning, and the morning after that. The porch box sat where it had always sat for a while, not quite ready to be moved. It had been there so long it felt structural, as much a part of the house as the mailbox or the house numbers above the door. Then someone moved it to the garage. Then the garage sale. Then it was gone, and the porch was simply a porch again, and a particular chapter of the house's life was over, quietly, without anyone quite marking it. When did the last delivery arrive, and did we notice it was the last? Or did we just wake up one morning and find the porch was empty? Sit with that question for as long as it takes, because most of them ended without ceremony, not with a farewell, not with a gathering, not with any announcement, just a Thursday when the truck didn't come, and a Friday when it didn't come either, and a Monday when someone remembered they should probably go to the store, and the slow, undramatic settling of the realization, over the course of a week or two, that the delivery wasn't coming back. No final note in the bottle, no last wave from the cab, just the empty porch, and the cool morning air, and the absence of a sound that had been, for your entire childhood, the first sound of the day. The world did not end, of course. The refrigerator remained full. You drove to the store, as everyone drove to the store, and the milk was there in its plastic jug under the fluorescent lights. And you put it in the cart and brought it home and poured it in the morning. And it was milk. It was perfectly adequate. The morning continued. Life went on with a thoroughness that is, in retrospect, somewhat astonishing. But something was different. Not in a way you would name to someone else, not in a way that seemed worth mentioning. Just quieter. The early morning was only the early morning now, without the sound that had been the sound of morning for your whole childhood. That low, patient rumble coming around the corner, the clink of glass in a wire carrier, those specific footsteps on the porch steps, the soft thud of the insulated box lid settling back into place. Gone. Not cruelly, not dramatically, just gone. The way sounds go when we stop needing them, the way a world reorganizes itself around a different set of arrangements, and the old sounds gradually become something you only hear in memory, at a particular angle of light, when you aren't quite expecting it. And the bottle, the cold, heavy, beautiful glass bottle with its cream line and its paper cap and its round trip back to the dairy. Gone too, replaced by something lighter, something that didn't need to return. Something you could simply throw away, and that disposability extended, without anyone meaning it to something less tangible, the relationship itself. The daily proof that someone outside your family knew your name and your order and your habits and thought those things worth knowing. The morning exchange that was never merely an exchange. The small, accidental community that formed itself around a front step and a wire basket and a returned empty bottle every day for years. What we have now is not without its virtues. No one reasonable would ask you to return to a world without modern refrigeration or the freedom of the supermarket or the abundance of variety that fills the contemporary grocery aisle. That is not the point of remembering this. The point is something quieter, and in its own way more important than any of that. The point is the name. He knew your name. He knew your mother's name. He knew that your family had a new baby. Because the order changed, and he adjusted without being told. He knew when you were sick, because the note in the bottle had a different quality, more hurried, more tired. And he noticed without remarking on it, and changed nothing about the reliability of his work, because his coming was itself the reassurance. He saw the house in every season. He was present at the doorstep through every stage of life on that street. The arrivals and the departures, the losses and the celebrations, the ordinary mornings and the mornings that were anything but ordinary. He didn't save anyone's life. He didn't change history. He came to the door. He set the bottles down and picked up the empties, and sometimes said good morning, and sometimes didn't need to say anything at all, because the arrangement itself was the communication. The whole daily cycle was the communication. The full bottles going in and the empty ones coming out. The note answered, the order fulfilled, the morning happening the way it was supposed to happen. Because Roy had been here. You probably haven't heard that sound in 50 years. The Divco engine idling at the curb in the gray-blue light before sunrise. The clink of glass in the wire carrier. The footsteps on the walk, deliberate and unhurried. The soft thud of the insulated box lid settling into place. The footsteps retreating. The engine picking up again. The truck rolling slowly to the next house, the next porch, the next family still asleep, not yet knowing that someone had already been there and gone, leaving what they needed, taking back the empty, asking nothing but the return. That sound is in there, in the oldest, quietest room of your memory, where the light is always the particular gray-blue of a 1963 morning, and the dew is still on the grass, and the birds are just beginning, and the street has not yet woken into the day it is going to become. In that room, the porch is not empty. In that room, Roy is on the walk. And if you go back there now, if you stand at the screen door in your bare feet and feel the cool air on your face and hear the bottles clink in the carrier as he comes up the steps, you will also feel, without anyone needing to explain it, what it meant to live in a world where food arrived with a face and a voice and a name, where trust was built in small daily increments on a front step in the early morning before the day got loud, where someone knew what you needed and brought it to you in the dark without being asked twice. He knew your name. You left a note in an empty bottle, and it was never ignored. And if you could stand on that porch one more time, just once, in the gray-blue light, just long enough to hear the truck coming around the corner, you know exactly what you would want to say. You know his name. It's been there all along.